Among many other things, Finland is highly praised for the security she provides to her people. And here we're talking about, the healthcare, we're talking about the welfare system, we're talking about the employee protection. In Finland, the employer can't just come and fire someone at will. You have to give proper explanation. Why do you have to fire someone? That is Finland that everybody knows. But slowly, things are taking a new turn. So in July this year, the government submitted a proposal to the parliament, and this proposal is about lowering the threshold for firing employees. We all know the unemployment situation in Finland right now is not looking good. And I believe so, in an attempt to combat this situation, the government said, maybe we should make it easier for the employers to fire employees. Maybe by doing so, it will make it easier for them to hire more people. I will explain a little bit more later. But in July this year, so the government proposed or submitted the proposal to the parliament, and this proposal aims to lower the threshold for the employers to fire employees. And I just saw the news yesterday that the committee which is responsible in employment has approved this bill. So this bill will go to the parliament and be voted whether to be accepted or not accepted. But if accepted, that it means it is now easier to fire someone. And let me go back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, that the aim for the government is to make it easier for employers to fire employees because they believe many employers, especially from small businesses, they are afraid of hiring people because it is not easy to get rid of these people if they underperform, they misbehave at workplaces. Yeah, so as a result, many businesses say, okay, we will do it on our own. We will not hire anybody because we don't want to go through all this trouble just to have someone that ends up underperforming and we can't fire them. Yeah, so I believe maybe the government has received these complaints from many businesses to an extent where they thought it could make sense that perhaps it should be easier for them to fire somebody, and if it's easier for them to fire someone, that makes it easier for them to accept someone into their workplaces. Yeah, that is all it's all about. Yeah, but again, these are not my own words. I saw this news on two articles from Ule. One was published in October and another one has been published yesterday. I'm going to read you both articles. They should not be very long, and I'm going to read them very, very quickly. After that, I'm going to want to see what do you think on this one. So let me start with an article that was published in October this year, and the title of this article said Finland plans to ease rules on firing workers. It reads as follows: the country's main blue-collar federation slams the government's proposal, calling it a significant weakening of job security. Petteri Orpo's government has submitted a parliamentary proposal to make it easier for employers to dismiss staff. Under the government proposal, a proper reason would suffice for terminating an employment contract compared with the current law, which requires the reason to be both proper and weighty. You have to, I believe there is some sort of weight which the employer must give in order for the firing to be acceptable. Yeah, but they are removing the weight. Only the proper reason is needed for you to be fired from a particular company. Not every instance of reproachable behavior or inadequate performance would constitute sufficient ground for dismissal, the government said in a statement. So they agree, like not every ground would be enough for somebody to be fired. Taking parental leave would not, for example, constitute ground for dismissal. Employment Minister Mattias Marttinen said the bill aims to remove barriers to employment and encourage companies to hire. He noted that the change is particularly important for small businesses, which often view the legal risk associated with the dismissal as a significant obstacle to recruitment. So they can't hire because they fear, like, if we hire, how are we going to get rid of this guy if he underperforms? Finland will not become a wild west as a result of this legislative change. Martin said at a press conference, employees' legal protections will remain strong. So they guarantee you that you will still be protected. Dismissal cannot be carried out arbitrarily or for discriminatory reasons. There must always be a lawful, justified reason under the law, he said. The employee side opposes easing dismissal rules. The employee side opposes easing dismissal rules. The Central Organization of Finnish Trade Unions said the proposal represents a significant weakening of job security. So trade unions, they are against this move. The proposal also loosens employers' reassignment obligation for dismissed workers. The proposal also loosens employers' reassignment obligation for dismissed workers. So I believe initially, before an employer fires someone, they had to give you the alternative job, something like that. But nowadays, if this is acceptable, then you don't have to be given an alternative work to do before you are being dismissed. You are just being dismissed all the way. Yes, and so it says the proposal also loosens employers' reassignment obligation for dismissed workers. Under current law, employers must always explore whether a dismissed employee can be reassigned to another position. The legislative plan would relax this requirement. Last year, the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment established tripartite working group to prepare the proposed changes. The group, however, did not reach an unanimous agreement. The government proposes that the legislative changes take effect at the start of next year. Yes, so like I told you, this proposal that was provided by the government has already got the green light from one of the committee in the parliament. And so now it waits only for the voting. Let me read you another article which was also published by Ule yesterday. Yes, about this approval. The title of this article says, Parliamentary Committee gives green light to controversial bill on firing workers. The government proposal would make it easier for employers to dismiss staff. And the article reads as follows. It says the Finnish Parliament's Employment and Equality Committee has approved the government's plans to lower the threshold for employers to fire workers. And the current government's proposal, a proper reason would suffice for terminating the employment contract compared with the current law, which requires reason to be both proper and weight. Of course, they are repeating some of the words which they wrote in the previous article. The committee chair, Aalto Satonen, in bracket NCP, a former employment minister, told the press conference on Thursday afternoon that the reform is especially aimed at improving the operating conditions of small and medium-sized companies, as they will be more willing to hire staff if the threshold for dismissal is lowered. Or in other language, they will be more willing to hire more people if firing them becomes easy. That's the condition. And okay, Satonen says recruitment is a big decision for a small company, which is what I agree. This is absolutely true. Hiring is not easy. Yes. Adding that the threshold in Finland is the 5th highest among OECD countries. Actually, this is one of the reasons Finland is also in the group of countries with highest security, job security. However, not every instance of poor behavior or inadequate performance would constitute sufficient ground for dismissal, the government has previously said in a statement. A substantial reason is still required, so it is certainly not about dismissals based on personal preference, Satonen said at the Thursday's press conference. However, the law will in practice affect the threshold for dismissing workers remains to be seen. As Satonen noted that only several years of legal practice will provide the answer. So I believe maybe after they have put this into practice, they will try to observe after some time, has it done any effect? And so the opposition has also given their opinion, which is what I will also read. Opposition, they say the government wants firing law. They have even changed these words from lowering threshold to firing law. They said the government's proposal has been roundly criticized as a firing law by opposition parties. The Employment and Equality Committee's vice chairperson, opposition MP Lauri Lulu of the SDP, argued that there is no evidence in legislative change that will improve employment. This is purely about weakening employee protection without any assessment of the real impact. No one can now say how much the threshold for dismissal will decrease. He's afraid. Maybe next day they will say you no longer need any reason, to fire anybody. How can we know that we won't reach there? He added that some 12,400 people lose their jobs in Finland every year on so-called personal grounds, meaning not as part of redundancy or restructuring talks, while a further 14,600 are dismissed during their probation periods. This is a weakening that affects the entire labor market, which hits the most vulnerable areas the hardest: young people, women, and those in low-paid jobs, said. The committee also issued an anonymous statement that the law's impact on people taking pregnancy and parental leave must be closely monitored until 2028. The bill will now proceed to a parliamentary main chamber to be voted on by MPs and could be assessed into law as early as the beginning of next year. So that's the news. Mr. Olpo's government says we should make it easier for these guys to fire their employees. Maybe by doing so, it will make it easier for them to hire more people. And this is how we solve unemployment rate in Finland. Tell me, what do you think about this thing? See you soon. Bye-bye.